I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the James City County Planning Commission. It's March 2nd, 2022 at 6 p.m. Before we call the roll, I would like to welcome everybody back to the dais. So, Dr. Rose and Ms. Null are no longer at the kids' table, so welcome back. And would like to welcome Mr. Rogers to the Planning Commission. This is his first meeting. He's come out of the Board of Zoning Appeals, so we are appreciative of him stepping up, and thank you for volunteering to serve. So welcome. So, Mr. Holt, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers. Here. Mr. Rogers represents the Berkeley District. Ms. Null.
Here.
Ms. Null represents the Stonehouse District. Mr. Rose.
Here.
Mr. Rose represents the Roberts District. Mr. Polster.
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District and is vice chair to the commission. Mr. Haldeman.
Here.
Mr. Haldeman is an at-large member. Mr. Croft.
Here.
Mr. Croft represents the Powhatan District. Mr. O'Connor.
Here.
Mr. O'Connor is an at-large member and is chair of the Planning Commission. I'm Paul Holt, Director of Community Development and Planning for the county, and sitting to my left this evening is Mr. Adam Kinsman, our county attorney. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. Appreciate it. Tonight, first item on our agenda is public comment, and this is time that's reserved for any items that anybody wishes to address to the Planning Commission that is not relevant to a public hearing that we will have this evening. So, is there anybody that wishes to speak in the public comment? Hearing and seeing none, we will move on to the reports of the commission.
Hey, gentleman's raising his hand. No?
So, well, are they here to speak on the public hearing? So that'll, sir, the public hearing will be later in the agenda. So this is anything not relevant to the public hearing. Thank you. So at this point, we'll move on to the reports of the commission. Mr. Polster, Policy Committee.
Okay, I've got three of them. All right. The first one I have is on the 10 February 2022 Policy Committee meeting. At that meeting, the committee members were Tim O'Connor, Jack Haldeman, and Frank Polster. Staff members present were Terry Costello, Deputy Zoning Administrator, Planner, Paxton Condon, Administrative Coordinator, Josh Crump, Principal Planner, Margot Zachman, Senior Budget and Accounting Analyst, and Cheryl Cochet, Assistant Director, FMS, Ellen Cook, Principal Planner, Susan Yates, Planner, Katie Pelletier, Administrative Coordinator. This was our first preliminary meeting for the fiscal year 2023-27 Capital Improvement Program. The purpose of the meeting was to allow members of the Policy Committee to discuss CIP applications with the planning and financial management staff. Policy Committee members reviewed their preliminary scores for the 33 CIP applications and discussed the comments amongst ourselves, and that was the first meeting that we had. The second one that we had was on the 17th of February, and I won't bore everybody with the number of folks that were there from the different staff, but this was the second meeting of the fiscal year 2023-27 Capital Improvement Program review, and the purpose was to allow members of the Policy Committee and the CIP applications and financial management folks to talk with the representatives from the General Services, Social Services, Stormwater, and the Williamsburg Regional Library. On the General Services, which was the General Service Administration Building project and the covered parking for specialty vehicles and trailers, Joanna Ripley, Assistant Director, General Services, and Sean Gordon, Chief Civil Engineer, General Services, provided answers to committee members' questions on future telecommuting of employees, potential impact on currently projected office space requirements, and rationale for requirements for the number of proposed waiting areas, conference rooms, and training rooms, and updates on the solar application for county facilities. On the telecommuting issue, General Services has very few that telecommute. There are only 11 that are eligible for intermittent telework, so they did not see space savings. On the proposed waiting area and training rooms, the revised space needs has a combined both staff and field, so some of these spaces are both warm-up rooms and training rooms that can also be cordoned off for emergencies where they may be used for sleeping quarters for bigger events, weather and emergencies of that nature. The other topic was the status of the installation of the solar panels application to both the General Services and covered parking projects. The application of solar panels for the General Services project was expanded to include the application of existing and planned county facilities. Staff is in the process of releasing a request for information to examine solar applications across county facilities. Though the solar panel application for the covered parking had a 12-year return on investment by reducing the law enforcement center's electrical bill, the cost of the covered facility was about $280K, while the solar application had an estimated cost of $320,000. Staff wants to look at other options and has included it as part of their request for information. On Project IDZ, Human Services Center renovation, Rebecca Venrup, the Director of Social Services, talked to us. Telecommuting issues was raised with this project also. Human Services has used telecommuting, but because of their team approach, they do not see telework for a large number of their staff. There are some discussions on the consolidation of human services that the facility surely needs to accommodate the projected 2040 workforce and the extent of the renovation, which is mainly driven by the removal of the Old Town medical portion of the facility. Adequate parking is available. On the stormwater CIP project, Tony Small was presented to us, and she talked about a set of 5 new stormwater projects. First one was the College and Skiffs Creek's watershed master plan. And these 2 projects are the last watersheds to have watershed master plans, which are required by the comp plan. Both have portions of the watershed that are on the DEQ impaired waters list, and the watershed plan will assist in identifying mitigation strategies. The TMD action plan updates and upgrade retrofits. This project is part of the renewal of the county's MS4 permit for the next 5-year cycle, so they're getting ready to do that, and they need the money for the consultant fees to be able to put that together. On the stream restoration project, maintenance and repairs, each of the past stream restorations require monitoring, and some of these facilities are older and will require maintenance. And of course, that's part of our MS4 permit to be able to keep those up and running. On the Route 5 flood mitigation study, the name of this project really should read the flood study of the Powhatan watershed. And with increasing precipitation, there are known flood issues at Route 5 News Road and at Long Hill. The last one was the JCC BMP retrofit. This project is looking at county BMPs that were developed with old standards. This is a great opportunity for matching funds from the state's SLAF program and retrofits these older facilities that the county owns to make sure that they stay up. The next one was the new James City County Library branch, or an alternative new jointly funded library project. And then they had 2 other ones in there, the James City County Library Playground, Friends of WRL funded, and the New Grove Library. Ms. Betsy Fowler, Director of the Williamsburg Regional Library, was the spokesperson for all 3 library projects. The first project was the new James City County and Library Branch Alternative New Joint Fund. This is the one that we had last year where they couldn't tell us where they wanted it, and so we were back talking about it again. By way of background, she said that JCC was clear that they were not interested in investing in the current library for a 4th renovation. The city of Williamsburg determined that they were not interested in participating in a joint facility, but that the existing location, and held the view that the library is a major economic driver for the city. Ms. Fowler did have a recent conversation with the city manager and county administrator, and caveated her statement that she was not speaking for them, but did give us a sense of where they stand. The city manager very much wants the new library built on the current site, and they have already put $8 million in cash to their CIP fund, which is different from us. They put it up front. The county administrator is willing to discuss it and has had some discussions with the board members, and is deferring to the board with some interest to explore it more. The library board did not make a motion at their January meeting that they preferred the site in the existing location. I will say that we just finished this evening rating this, and it'll be for the agenda item on the 14th. And in fact, we've all come to the agreement that this needs to be decided by the Board of Supervisors and not us, given where we are. The next one was the New Grove Library at 10,000 square feet was discussed and envisioned as a neighborhood library with children's material and popular high-demand items. The neighborhood library is specifically designed to meet the specific needs of that area for several populations. They have done intensive outreach to the historical disadvantaged and new immigrant residents that have moved into that area, addressing English as a second language challenges, She also indicated the area is the affordable housing area for the county. The Friends of the Library have underwritten a lot of programming in this area, like enrichment programs for children and parents, and a high-speed Wi-Fi at the Frank Center. It was $15,000 for 5 years that the Friends put into that, which I thought worked out really well for the COVID period and the schooling for it. They've gotten a positive response, but the problem is that even with partnering with the Franks Rec Center and the James River School, the space is not adequate and there is a need to intensify their outreach, but it is limited without additional space. To that point, Ms. Fowler indicated that she has had some discussions with the county administrator and Mr. Carnifax, director of Parks and Recs, about the idea of co-location of the library with the proposed new Lower County. Ms. Fowler indicated that she would address the topic at our upcoming meeting, and in fact, we're asking her to come back on the 14th to tell us where it is. We don't think it's a full library, but we do see the need to have a room for the programming and the outreach that they have and some of the technology pieces that she talked about. Ms. Fowler provided clarification on the James City County Library Playground, Friends of the WRL, Friends of the Williamsburg Regional Library. The project is all donor funded, and the cost to the county was for staff time for the project since it's on county property. This was the reason for the inclusion on the CIP project list, and the maintenance of the playground area is also a county cost since it's in the county property. We didn't rate it very high because of the funding, but you'll see on the 14th, we're asking the county administrator to look at giving the county the time so that they can do this for the design piece for it. The 24 February 22 Policy Committee report. This one, once again, I won't go through the number of folks. This was the third meeting for the fiscal year 2023-27 Capital Improvement Program review. The purpose of this meeting was to allow members of the Policy Committee to discuss the CIP applications with the planning and financial management staff and feedback. We had the Parks and Rec folks, the Economic Development, and the Williamsburg, James City County schools. The first one that we heard from was a series of 5 projects from the rec folks, the Chickahominy Riverfront Park Campground area, the Jamestown Beach Event Park improvements, the Marina Phase 2, and then the War Hill Sports Complex Connector Road, and then the expansion of that War Hill complex for the baseball field expansion. Mr. Alistair Perkinson, Parks Administrator, addressed a series of questions on the Chickahominy Riverfront Park Campground, Jamestown Beach Event Park improvements to the Marina, and the War Hill Complex and the Connector Road that revolved around the improvements and estimated revenue and the possibility of combining projects to realize the reduced costs. Mr. Perkinson had outlined the current and expected revenues for these projects. He also indicated that for the Chickahominy Riverfront Park, there are separate projects that require asphalt paving, and savings could be realized by consolidating these separate requirements. The most striking example of a return on investment project was the relocation and upgrade of the RV park and storages at the Chickahominy Riverfront Park. The park in FY21, believe it or not, generated $620,000 in revenue, which $470,000 were for the camping fees. Over 50% of the entire parks recs budget is supported by these types of fees. So that's a nice return on investment. The business, the last one, two more. The Business Ready Site Program, Mr. Johnson, the Director of Economic Development, talked to us. He addressed the questions of his Business Ready Site Program, which contained 4 properties out of the 11 that were reviewed by the state economic development folks. The state reports were for 2 properties that are owned by James City County, the Greenmount and Stonehouse Commerce Park, and 2 that are private, the Barnesville, Hornsby, and the Hazelwood. And the Barnesville one is right next to the Hornsby property that we just approved. The 2-year-old state-generated report had an engineering and design cost to bring them to Tier 1 level at $550,000 for all 4. It assumes a cost of 50% sharing by the owners of the 2 private properties. Based on recent events, it appears that the Hazelwood Farm project now has a Tier 2 rating, and the county would not invest to bring it to a Tier 3. The Hornsby property owners have not been contacted to see if they are willing to participate in the Tier 2 effort on a projected 50% cost sharing. The last one, and this is a good one for us, I think, is the Williamsburg, James City County school system that talked to us about the Jamestown High School cafeteria school expansion and the Lafayette High School renovation and the pre-K space. The CFO of the WJCC, Mr. Daniel Keever, provided an update to both the JHS cafeteria expansions and the Lafayette renovations, providing updated capacity figures for both high schools. The series of questions that he addressed examined a potential of 8 new classrooms at Lafayette to offset the capacity issues at Jamestown. Mr. Keever indicated that with the completion of the Lafayette renovation, rezoning/redistricting is what he calls it, would take place to offset the capacity issues forecasted in the next 6 years at Jamestown. On the pre-K special project, Mr. Keever provided an update on the current capacity of pre-K at 394 with a dynamic waiting list of about 97. He addressed the WJCC and JCC funded ANLAR report that showed an unserved population of 231 pre-K students, which he was comfortable with in terms of planning. Mr. Keever addressed the location and number of pre-K buildings questioned by indicating that they are in the beginning stages of letting a feasibility study and engineering and design contract to determine the location and number of freestanding pre-K buildings. 2 freestanding pre-K buildings were discussed with both boards, and it might result in 3 freestanding buildings based on the feasibility study. And as I said, we're going to be able to see this all on the 14th for the rating of this. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Polster. Any questions of Mr. Polster? Ms. Knoll, Development Review Committee.
Development Review Committee did not meet in February. We had no projects.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item E, which is the consent agenda. These are items that are typically considered non-controversial and are on there for your all's approval. Tonight we have the minutes of the February 2nd, 2022 regular meeting, and we also have the site plan 21-002 Park at Westport. Does anybody want to pull anything off for discussion? Mr. Polster?
I had a question that I'd like to pull the Westport piece off.
Okay.
Because I forgot to write that to the staff.
So we will pull that off. Does that move to a public hearing or just a separate?
No, just separate discussion item.
Okay. So at this point, I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes of the February 2nd, 2022 regular meeting.
So moved.
So we have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And I believe, Mr. Rogers, you're abstaining?
I would abstain.
And I'm
And
abstaining
Mr. Krupp
also.
is abstaining. Thank you very much. Our second item for consideration tonight is Site Plan 21-0002, Park at Westport. Mr. Polster?
I'm sorry, I could have written this to the staff, but it was unclear in the staff report whether or not the stormwater's folks concerned over the BMPs on those lots, whether or not that was resolved, if there wouldn't be any interference at all with those 2 locations.
As far as I know, that's been resolved.
Good, that was it. Sorry, I didn't
Okay.
get that to you earlier.
That's okay.
Any other questions? On that, I'll ask for a motion to approve Site Plan 21-0002, Park at Westport.
So moved.
So we have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So tonight, we have one public hearing. It's SUP-21-0023, Bush Springs Road Extension of Public Water and Sewer Facilities. So before we get into more discussion, obviously the applicant has come back to answer questions that we all had last month, and we have folks in attendance this evening. We did open and close the public hearing last month, so I am happy to reopen the public hearing if that's what you all would like to do. So if that's the case, I would just like to ask for a voice vote. So if anybody's in favor of reopening the public hearing, I'll take a motion for that.
So moved.
All right, there's a motion to reopen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So, good evening, John. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Mr. J. Epstein has applied for a special use permit to allow for the installation of public water and sewer facilities by extending an existing force main and water main within the Bush Springs Road right-of-way from the Bush Springs Road and Tuana Woods Road intersection heading south. The force main and water main would be further extended within right-of-way proposed to be located on private property owned by the applicant. The existing Bush Springs Road right-of-way is zoned A1 General Agriculture and R1 Limited Residential and designated low-density residential on the 2045 Comprehensive Plan Land Use Map. Properties for the proposed future right-of-way are zoned R1 Limited Residential and designated low-density residential and rural lands. Following the discussion at the February 2nd, 2022 Planning Commission meeting, additional information has been provided for the Planning Commission's consideration. The applicant provided a revised project narrative and additional supplemental documentation regarding the project, the costs of connections to public water and sewer in comparison to well and septic systems, and how the project relates to adjacent properties. The James City Service Authority has prepared a memorandum explaining when connections are required and what the costs of connections are. Staff notes that the county and the JCSA do not currently have any programs for assistance with the cost of connection. Staff received questions regarding where existing septic systems are located and what would happen if they are damaged during construction. The county does not maintain records of drain fields. However, the applicant has provided documentation from the Virginia Department of Health. Staff also explored the possibility of adding an SUP condition to require that the applicant be responsible for remediation if a drain field is damaged during construction. However, after consultation with the county attorney's office, it was determined that this condition was not viable. Finally, at the applicant's suggestion, staff explored if an SUP condition could remove the requirement for adjacent properties to connect to public water and sewer. After consultation with the county attorney's office, it was determined that such an SUP condition would need to explicitly prohibit those connections and not allow those property owners to have that choice, and so staff does not support that condition. Staff finds the proposal to be inconsistent with the recommendations of the adopted 2045 Comprehensive Plan, and therefore does not recommend approval of the proposed SUP. Should the Planning Commission wish to recommend approval, staff has included proposed conditions for consideration. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. We also have JCSA and the applicant team in attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Reisinger. Any questions? I would like to take a moment too to recognize Doug Powell, General Manager of JCSA. He was kind enough to join us tonight to answer any other questions you might have. So, Mr. Kropp?
Good evening, Mr. Reisinger. Just a question. I understand that this special use permit request is only for the water and the sewer to connect to the property. It's in no way tied into a future development of that property necessarily. And an SUP conveys in perpetuity with the property. My question is, if this request was approved ultimately by the board and then the property was sold to another owner, that SUP for water and sewer extension would still convey with that sale. Is that correct?
Correct. Is the commencement of construction condition, which would require that it be installed within 24 months of issuance of the SUP. But should it be installed or an extension be granted, then that's correct.
So even though there's a certain applicant requesting that right now, that might not necessarily be the end user down the road.
Correct.
Okay. If this SUP was denied and the property was developed by right, does whoever develops it by right have to do a traffic impact analysis for Bush Springs Road, or is that not required?
Within the R1 zoning district, by right, they can have a density of 1 dwelling unit per acre. If they were to exceed it, then they would need an SUP, at which point we could apply those legislative requirements.
Okay.
Otherwise, for a by right development, VDOT would certainly be included in the review of those plans, but likely not a traffic impact analysis.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Polster?
Mr. Reisinger, I don't know if you can answer, it's the applicant, but I had sent you an email that you did reply to, And it was my concern about the sharing of the information that the JCSA had provided in terms of hookup fees, determinations between the VDH, et cetera, in terms of the fields. And on that question, you also indicated that there was a scheduled meeting with the affected personnel from the parcel here, but in fact, that meeting did not occur. And so the two questions I have is, has there been any sharing of any of the information that you provided us, as well as the information that came from the applicant with the residents of Bush Springs?
Certainly that information shared in the presentation for staff side, I would defer to the applicant as far as what their outreach efforts have included.
Okay, and then the second one is, do you know why the applicant and the meeting was canceled at all?
I would defer that to the applicant.
Okay.
Dr. Rose?
You shared with us the cost, the general cost of hookup that anyone living along the road would incur if they had to hook to this. Just so I understood it, it seemed like there were a few costs that the hookup, and then there was a $16,000 additional charge. Can you explain what that was?
I believe our representatives from JCSA will be best able to speak to that.
Okay. I mean, I guess what I'm really asking is, just very clearly, I want to understand, for anybody living along Bush Springs Road, if they have to hook to this, what is the cost?
Right.
16.
Please. Might as well make you earn your dollar tonight. So.
Good evening. To answer the specific question about the $16,000, that is for the cost of a grinder pump. In certain areas where the topography is not sufficient for the wastewater to flow into the system, a customer, a resident would need what we call a grinder pump, so to pump that flow from their house to our main. That would be the requirement. That piece of equipment would be a requirement to be purchased by the customer, be their responsibility to purchase it and install it. And those grinder pumps generally, and it's a general cost estimate, but generally cost about $16,000. So that would be, for areas where you need a grinder pump, that's an added expense for the customer in addition to the connection fees that were outlined in the memo.
And so if we include that, if we assume that it's a pretty flat area, I guess, and we'd assume they would need that.
Yep. Our determination is that probably everybody in that area would need a grinder pump. Yes.
So the cost for connection, if I'm just understanding everything I've seen, is around maybe $25,000 per person or per house.
I think that's approximately correct. Yes. The systems and local fees that were outlined in the memo are a total of $10,556. If you add the $16,000 to that, that gets you in the vicinity of $26,000. There's still also the cost of the installation, so it would probably be slightly higher than that even.
So I added it all up, and one house with everything that you require and a grinder pump, and say $23 per running foot to the house and so forth, so let's say 100 feet, that's $28,856. That is a horrendous amount of money for people to have to incur. And those grinders, I'm familiar with them. I came from a house in Greene County that had a grinder, and they are not horribly reliable. If people stick the wrong stuff down their drain, they can break.
That's
and
true.
A lot of times they don't work. Is that correct?
I don't necessarily dispute that. I think if you have a grinder pump, you certainly do need to follow the requirements of what you put in there and how you maintain it. Yes.
Okay.
Those grinder pumps, if folks elect to get onto the JCSA program, then the maintenance of them is the responsibility of JCSA? Is that?
If a resident has a grinder pump and it meets our specifications, which any new grinder pump would, but if a resident has a grinder pump and it meets our specifications, they can purchase a maintenance agreement from us, and then we will take that responsibility. The cost for that maintenance agreement, I want to say, is about $400 a year right now, and it's included, it's prorated in the customer's bill every month.
Mr. Polster?
Mr. Kraft asked the question about the cost of that sewer line, and then, of course, he asked if they had to go to a central well as opposed to being hooked up. I didn't quite catch what the figures were in terms of what that line is going to cost and whose cost that is, to include the cost for what they have to do internal to their 59 homes. Do you have an estimate of what that is?
I don't really have an estimate on the cost of the sewer line, and that cost would be the responsibility of the developer. I think we provided some information that said the cost of a central well runs about $2 to $2.5 million.
Is it comparable to say that the cost of the developer to bring that sewer line is probably the same amount?
I really don't know. It depends on topography, the length of the line. I didn't really do that analysis before the meeting, so I can't really say for sure with this particular line.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Powell, if you could, can you clarify that we were told in the presentation last month that if we extended sewer and water, it would be limited to 49 units. Can you clarify that from a JCSA policy perspective?
I think the 49 unit magic number is that's the number of, if you go above 49 units, then it requires a central well. So that's, I think that's the reason that the proposal's for 49 units.
Okay, thank you.
I don't recall that being the answer.
Yeah,
It was the overflow or something like that.
Is there a looping requirement? I think.
Yes, there's a looping requirement as well.
Okay.
So Mr. Usock's going to help me out with that
Great,
question.
thanks.
Good evening. Yeah, on the water side, we have a requirement to loop the system if it's over 49 connections, and it's not really feasible. So I guess the developer decided, that they would stick with the 49. And on the sewer side, if a development's under 50 connections, they would be allowed to use grinder pumps. If it's over 50 connections, they have to do a gravity system with a central lift station.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions before he goes?
I'm sorry, but what I heard was that if it's under 49, you wouldn't need a central well?
No. So the central well requirement is basically for developments outside of the PSA. So obviously, right now, this development is outside of the PSA. So if the water line isn't extended and it's developed, then there would be the central well requirement.
Cost of that central well, I think, was what, $2.5 million?
Yeah, probably in the range of $2.5 million. The most recent ones were Westport and Liberty Ridge, and they're pretty robust facilities when you include fire protection and everything else. So
And I understand that it's a loser to you, the JCS, once you end up having to take it over.
operationally, yes, 100 customers couldn't support the cost to operate and maintain that facility.
Okay, thank you.
No, it's quite. Any other questions for JCSA at the moment?
I might be repeating your question, but I got lost in the discussion about if there's the central well, that at some point the homes are there, the developer's gone, then the county owns it and maintains it. Could you just maybe capture that for me?
Sure.
If you extend the sewer line,
Right.
Take the 25-year view as to what the county's getting into.
Sure. So first of all, let me just try to clarify, because it did misspeak. The 49 units wasn't for the central well. That's for a central pump station. So I apologize. I think I confused that. But to answer your question, if there is a central well, yes, it's the developer's responsibility to construct it. Once it's constructed, they turn it over to us, and the JCSA operates it.
So what I'm wondering about is, let's say there's two identical neighborhoods outside the PSA, and one has the central well at 49 homes. Excuse me, the other one, we extended the water and sewer line. How do you see the costs? It sounded like it's more expensive to do the well, but I mean,
Yeah,
can you put something on that?
The central well is more expensive because there's because it's a fairly small number of customers, so you don't have the economies of scale. We have, I think, 8 or 9 independent systems right now. We keep records of how much revenue we get from the customers for those independent systems and how much they cost us, and we lose money on every single one of them. That's obviously not the case with the central system. It's an economies of scale issue where we really just can't recoup the cost, assuming that we charge the customers of an independent well, community well system, the same that we charge the customers in our central system, which has been our policy for a number of years.
That's just policy.
Yes, that's a legislative policy, yes.
Any other questions?
I have one more question from Mr. Reisinger. And if you know this, do you know how many properties are along Bush Springs Road that would potentially have to connect to the central line?
I don't have an exact figure, but it's close to 40, I believe, properties, not necessarily current homes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff or JCSA team? Thank you very much. So at this point, I would like to reopen the public hearing, and we'll invite Mr. Getty up to add to his presentation from prior.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I'm Vernon Getty. It's my pleasure to be back before you tonight. The applicant is here, Jay Epstein and his daughter Morgan, and William Feltz with Land Tech Resources, the engineers on the project. I would like to just briefly review the material most of you heard last month. I know Mr. Rogers is new and Mr. Kropp wasn't here, but of course, this is a special use permit to extend public water and sewer. Absent this SUP, this property will be developed using individual septic tanks and a central well system. And you all have heard the JCSA representatives describe the disadvantages to them and to the county of a central well system. Under its R1 zoning, a by right development could have 90-some units. And again, you heard, we mentioned them last month, but the development constraints here of looping a water line and not having to do a central pump station are going to limit this development to 49 lots with the public water and sewer. One of the great advantages is, and you can see the lighter yellow here, is area that can be saved in trees if you don't have to clear for septic fields. And it's 14 to 15 acres of this property. The goals of the comprehensive plan and the PSA to channel growth to areas inside the PSA don't apply here. The property is already zoned R1. It is going to be developed. So the decision here is not going to steer growth one way or the other. In fact, you're likely to end up with a more dense development if you force the central well system and individual septic, because the developer will need to recoup the cost of that central well system. I think the narrower question here, this isn't the comp plan issue you all have dealt with many times of moving the PSA line. This is an individual case where you can grant a special use permit to extend these lines. And it's been done many times over the years in a variety of circumstances, both to serve new developments and at least one case, a major new development, to address environmental issues and to improve the utility system. We think the relevant issue is whether it's better for the county, the service authority, the neighbors, the environment to develop this particular property with septic and central well or public water and sewer. think there are a number of benefits to the public water and sewer. It's clearly better environmentally. You can both save the trees, you can put that in open space, get carbon credits, and septic will ultimately fail. And central sewer system is much better for the environment in this sensitive location. You've heard the description of how central wells are drained on JCSA. The revenues simply don't cover their expenses. Future connections are available. The only situation in which a person is forced to connect under JCSA regulations, and I'll elaborate a little bit in a second, is if their system totally fails. It has failed and is not repairable. So in that situation, you're looking at either replacing that entirely in some fashion or connecting. Those are the only two choices. As I mentioned, we think this proposal with public water and sewer better meets the environmental goals of the comprehensive plan. It is compatible surrounding zoning, certainly, and it promotes public health and safety by providing reliable and efficient water service. And Beth, if you could pull up the other. I think you all have all seen this, but this is from the county GIS system, Bush Springs Road, showing the various properties and homes along it. Homes are generally 45, 46 feet to 100 feet from the street. Borderline, these are small lines. This would be perhaps a 5-inch pipe. You would need a 2-foot trench, 3 feet deep, to install this. And Bush Springs Road is a 15-foot road and a 30-foot right-of-way. Here, as you're coming down the road, you can see these locations. With a major assist from Mr. Polster. This is information on the closest lots to the road from the health department septic permits. There was a concern that the installation of these lines could damage drain fields and the like, and certainly our review of the permit documents indicates that that would not be the case. John mentioned we had suggested to staff that they impose a condition in the SUP requiring the applicant to pay to fix any problems if they did occur. We're confident they won't based on this information. They have told us they don't think they can do that, but Jay has asked me to commit publicly to you all that if that situation takes place, he will pay to fix any damage to any private systems. Covered a good bit of this in prior discussion. In terms of the requirement to connect, there's another provision. There was a discussion of the provision that says the county would have to impose an affirmative condition prohibiting connection in order for someone not to have to connect and be able to replace their existing system if it failed totally. There is another provision that gives JCSA broad discretionary authority. It's the first one listed in the materials Doug sent you that says the service authority cannot require connection if it deems it to be in the best interest of the service authority. So there is discretion there that they could elect not to make a person connect. This is a decision that's outside, obviously, the applicant's control. It's a county JCSA decision, but that is out there as a possibility. Another advantage of this, of course, tied to the water line extension, is both the availability if you have a well failure, but also that it would bring fire hydrants down the road and improve fire safety. All have seen and reviewed the potential cost. My only comment on that would be, remember that this is a cost only imposed if there's a total failure of an existing system. So there's either going to be a cost to replace that in its entirety with a new system of some type, if that's possible, versus the cost you see to connect to the public system. Finally, I would say we've discussed this. Jay and his daughter reserved a room at the Norwich Library and extended an invitation to have a meeting and discuss it, I think, through Alice Wilson, who I suspect is here. The day before that meeting, got a call and said they decided not to meet. So there was an effort made to meet, to share information, but it didn't. So again, we think this, in this situation, it is best for the county, JCSA, the applicant, and the neighbors to allow the extension of this public and water and sewer line to serve this property. And we'd be glad to answer any other questions. William Phelps is here and can answer if you have any questions about the installation, the excuse me, the line and potential impacts from that. So if I can talk, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Getty. Dr. Rose?
Oh,
I saw you lean forward, so I just assumed you were.
could you go back one slide, please? I just wanted to see, so you estimated the cost for a brand-new septic system if there's fails between $8,000 and $14,000.
Yeah, that I think came probably from
Okay.
William. Yeah.
Okay, and you said a couple times that you see this as a benefit to the community to extend this line, but it wasn't clear what those benefits to the community are. Could you clarify what those are?
Sure. I mean, it's an option. If you have a total septic failure and there's not another way to install septic on your property, this provides an option, albeit probably a more expensive one, but it does allow you to connect to public sewer. And I also point out the availability of public water and sewer, I think, would help with property values.
Holster?
I've got a series of questions, Mr. Getty, and I want to come back to what Mr. Powell was talking about. And he's estimated, I think the cost was 2.5 for the central well, which is the developer's cost. But the estimate that I think he provided, Mr. Kraft, did not include any of the work that would actually take place on the property, grinder pumps, lines, and things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, the
And so
2.5
what
million,
would-
I think, is just the
Right.
central well
Right.
system.
So what do you think that the total cost is to be able to put a central well and then run all the grinders and all that stuff that you need to do just for that property?
Trying to save the trees is where we started with all this thing, and that was my goal with the solar garden. The central well, 2.2 million. With a density of 49 units, you can do the math and figure it out. If we don't have the central well and we bring the public water in, it's going to be limited to those 49 units. We go back to that central well, density is going to have to increase to be able to equalize that cost over more units. As far as the grinder pump, and we're bringing in a forced main, a forced line, a 5-inch line, all the way from Route 60. Okay, that means the neighbors have to connect in with a grinder pump, and that cost is about $8,000 for the actual piece of the grinder pump in Enviro 1.
Your lots would each have
Yeah,
a grinder pump.
and each one of my lots would have a grinder pump, and that cost is $8,000. We've done it before at other developments, but, that's the cost. That's the cost of development, and we're looking to build this, and we are going to build it. And I would prefer to save the trees, but I get concerned too with our neighbors. And I really wanted to meet with the neighbors. We were able, my daughter talked to 3 or 4 of them over the phone about locations for septic. But the positive points are that we're going to bring fire and safety down the road, the fire hydrants coming in, which they don't have now. That neighborhood at the end of Bush Springs has been neglected for years. Some of the comments, and some of you weren't here last time, but some of the comments were about, well, they cleaned the snow off at Toanna Woods, but further down, we're just neglected for up to 7 days. And they're worried about, us displacing them. We're coming there on that roadway, but we're coming in with a $30 million project. So they're no longer at the end of the road, and they have a spokesperson. And also, with that spokesperson, we're paying taxes, about a couple $100,000.
So let me come back to the question, because I don't think I got an answer. $2.2 million was for the central well. I do the math to figure out what the rest of it costs? Is that the answer?
No. I said I just didn't do it. If you take 2 million into 50, that's about 40,000.
He's working out the per lot cost
The
for
per
the
lot
central
cost,
well
yeah.
system. You're asking for the total
Yeah,
cost.
I'm just looking for the total cost.
Oh, the total cost for the whole development?
No,
Oh, just for the,
the central well, and hooking up the grinder, putting the
okay,
pipes in
40, probably around 60,000,
Per lot,
per lot. So
Yeah,
that's 60,000 times,
49.
49, 50.
well, no, if you did this by right, you would have 98.
Yeah.
So that's 100, so that's 6.
No, it would be less then because we're able to share the cost of
Yeah.
the central well
You'd have,
with more units.
It would be
you'd
cut
have
it
the
in half.
cost of the,
Central well, but no grinder pumps.
Okay, so if it was 49 lots, it would be 60,000 a shot, plus the 2.2.
Including the 2 point.
So if it's by right, it's central well, but it's septic, so there are no grinder pumps. If it's on public water and sewer, it's public water, but grinder pumps into the sewer force main.
Okay, so the follow-on question is Mr. Powell wasn't able to tell me what the cost would be to run the line if it was hooked up to the county from 60 all the way down. So what is your estimated cost on that?
About 1.8.
So you save money.
Wasn't the intention.
Oh, no,
yeah.
I'm just trying to figure
know.
out what the
Yes.
math is. I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to be that way. Okay, let me do some follow-on for it. I think it's really with Mr. Getty. If you can take a look at 155 Bush Spring Roads, and we'll start there.
Yeah.
There it is.
One of the things that struck me was that when I asked for this information, and I went to the VDH guys to get it, I was pointing out properties that I thought may be impacted.
Right.
And that was the reason for that. But I didn't ask for the rest of the information because of the time limit and all the rest of it. But what I was struck with is that in some cases with these drawings, you're not really sure. So on this one specifically, there's a 90-foot set of 77 feet of pipes that goes there. And then if you add up where it is from the front of the house plus the 8, whatever, I'm trying to figure out where the road is to the end of that drain field, what that distance is.
155. This is a photo, so Joe, you want to show?
Actually, we talked.
We were back to the one that you had, the
Yeah,
diagram that you
I
had.
am. I'm just showing you all a photo of
Right.
that same lot that has the approximate location right in here.
The homeowner.
Mr. Epstein? We come up so everybody can hear you.
Okay. The homeowner is here on that, and this is one that we were able to talk to. And basically, if you go back to that last
Yeah,
picture.
I'm trying.
Where the trees are, there's no longer, well, if you, 155, but if you go to the actual hold on here. I'm sorry. There we go, right here. If you see the 3 trees up, the homeowner explained to me that there's only 1 tree left. And between the house and the trees is where we believe the septic field is.
Okay, could you come to 130, please? 130? And
Rise are better than me.
I thought we were on 130 because that's the diagram you had. And this is the one I was talking about. When you look at the distance of those lines, which are where the drain fields are, the distance from the house, I can't tell what the distance is from the road to the end of that drain field. Can you?
Well, what you would do is if you would flip it around.
There's a 60, are we looking at this one?
No, the one to the right.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about the one to the left.
Oh, the one to the left. Okay, which one?
Here's
Right
a
there.
60-foot
Yeah.
building
That's what I couldn't
setback
tell.
line.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the other piece that I was getting ready to say, because it's the same, I have the same problem with several others here, but the age of some of these systems are almost at the end, or they have, it looks like in the diagrams of these properties, that they've replaced the box in this. And so it's not just a question of the interference that may occur when you put the line is, but what the age of those systems are. And so is it cheaper to have the box like the one that you have on the right there, which is what this one was, an upgrade because of the garage that's in there. Is it cheaper for them to just do an upgrade to their existing system or to take on the cost of hooking up, given the age of their systems?
They should have a choice.
Okay, I'm just trying to get to how I'm looking at it. And
I got you.
I only looked at the 7 here and not the rest of the properties of that's 40. And I was trying to get an idea of the age of the systems, what work had been done, because the PDFs that we both got from them show the history of that property. And it shows you what they've made. In some cases, there have been modifications on that. Now, the other one that I'd like to see, and it's not just the sewer lines and the drain fields. And once again, I don't know for all of the properties, but there's the one where the property is right up against the road for it. Do you know which one that is?
Yeah, and that has the septic to the rear.
Yes. See where the well is? Is that going to be impacted?
This is, and we can bring the engineer up, but it's a very small.
Okay, but there are these kind of concerns, which is, I only looked at 7 of these, and I thought these were the problem. I didn't look at the rest of them. And I was just trying to get an idea of what the problems are, and then I'm getting to the point. Yes, I understand they may want a choice, but a choice is if their system fails, and they're old systems, and the line's in there, then they don't have a choice in terms of the money. Well, no, I'm just
Oh, no,
making a
I'm
statement
with
of
you. I'm
fact.
with you 100%.
Oh, okay.
But that was my, I thought, because we're doing an SUP, and, in the SUP, through JCSA guidelines, we can put conditions, and we can, and planning comes back and say.
I'm going to defer to the county attorney on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
those
like-
discussions were had.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
We
but, yeah.
suggested
So-
conditions, and they've said they
I
can
asked
do
for
it.
a sample of 7 to get an idea what the 40 is. Not only the topography, where their locations are, but also to try to get an idea of how old the systems were, what repair works have been done, with just a sample of 7. I mean, without even looking at the other 33.
And we looked at some other ones, and we had, one of the pictures that we have here is a comment from one of the homeowners.
Oh,
that
I
we
saw
came to
that one,
last
yeah,
time.
yeah.
That he's got
Right.
it failing now.
And so I would have felt more comfortable if, from when we talked to you to begin with, and this time, you would have been able to take a look at the properties that were impacted, as opposed to me sending you something about the 7 that I was really concerned about because of the location. And so that's the issue that I have.
It took you versus me.
Pardon?
It took you versus me because, I had called over there to try to get the information. And when you made the call and I made the call, it came back to us in a day.
Well,
Yeah.
to tell you the truth is, when I asked for that request on a Monday,
Yeah.
this Monday, FOIA request takes 5 days. and they were going to try to get it to me by Friday. And I said, that's fine, because, this isn't over. I mean, it's still going to go to someplace else. So just having an idea of what the problem space may be, to have a discussion with you right now was what I was trying to do. So I think both of us were very fortunate that Ms. Wainwright, because they're very busy, apparently there's a lot of folks trying to find out information about this.
I went to the door, and it's closed.
Right. So anyhow, I don't mean to belabor this, but I think that's the end of my questions.
I think there's a little confusion. So Frank, I have this note that came from Mr. Powell to all of us. And it says, if a property is located in the PSA and does not meet one of the exceptions listed above, which we have there, the owner will be required to connect to the JCSA facilities if their well and or septic fails, or if a new home is constructed. I want it to be clear that residents can repair wells and septic systems without being required to connect, but they would not be able to drill a new well or install a new septic system. Hello, I mean, this is scary.
And this is, who's come from?
Mr. Powell.
I read
That's the
same thing.
JCSA regulation.
Yeah, but there's an exception to that regulation that basically says that with an SUP, that you can, and I quoted that right out of the regulations, that we could go ahead and say, no, they don't have to hook in. And then
Epstein, if we could get you closer to the mic so we can get you on
Oh, I'm sorry.
TV
There are
and for
two
the minutes,
exceptions.
that's all right.
Okay.
One would be an SUP condition that prohibits hookup, and the other is JCSA exercising its discretion under that very first
see that,
exception.
I think you can understand why I was concerned about my first question, because even I have difficulty understanding what's what.
Yeah.
Okay? And so some folks came to us, the last one that we were all concerned about, and I'm sorry they didn't come to share some of this information, but I'm still confused on some of these issues, which why I'm asking.
Yeah.
And until I feel comfortable that my wife could understand this,
Right.
I don't expect anybody else to, okay? And so I'm just, I don't mean to be difficult, I really don't.
No, you're not at all.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just one thing that I don't know. Do you know what, or expect what the average home will sell for in this development?
it'll start over 500,000. Because of the acreage, some of them will go up to probably 700 plus. It's a step above what we're doing at Walnut Farms, which the average price is in the fives. Now,
And I'm sorry, one more question. You had estimates for connection that was different from what we got from JCSA. What was your estimate for the connection? It was about 15,000
the connection for
these houses along the road. I think you had your estimate of the connection.
a new septic system, if they could put it in, was 14,000.
Right.
The sewer extension with the force main, if you wish to connect, it was $9,000 was the approximate cost for the Enviro-One. That's my purchase price at Ferguson, a little bit less than that. Plus the cost of the tap fee, which I put in at $5,000, and other costs would be install the sewer line connection from the home, and you also have to include the abandonment of the septic system. So you have those costs that add to them. And my comment was simply that, it's not the best way to go if you can use your secondary location for your septic. And that's another question that nobody has answered. If you have your primary fail and you've got a secondary, and I showed one here on this picture, you have a secondary place to go. And that should be an alternative for the people. As far as the water connection, it's a win-win. It's less than the well, replacing your well.
Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Rogers?
I had a question. It doesn't seem very connected to what's going on, so I may have to take it back a little bit. But what I thought I understood was the SUP would not have as a condition that the builder would take on some sort of liability for damage or repairs to these homeowners
Correct.
as it went up, as the pipe goes up the road. But I guess in addition to being struck with just how super narrow that road is, I've been on that road. It's very, very small, and then you're in people's yards. I get, and maybe you can answer it quickly, but this idea of all repairs, like what if I live on that road and my idea of damage is different than your idea of damage? Like where does it go? To me, this is why it wouldn't be in the SUP, because I don't think it would be the county's job to arbitrate. But how do you all see it?
I mean, what we see is the question we had been talking about was damage to an existing septic field or well that might happen to extend into the public right-of-way. All the work he does will be within the VDOT right-of-way. And as I said, it's a trench this wide.
This deep.
And that deep, yeah. And what he is saying is if he does damage anything, if you run into that situation, he'll pay to fix.
We're about 18 inches from the pavement.
Actually,
And
you
then
could put it under the pavement
Or
if you
you
wanted
could, yeah.
to.
I'm sorry, I do have one more question. You offered to pay for damages. Was there ever a consideration to pay for the connection?
No.
Because it seems like that would have saved money based on my estimates, or given the cost of these houses, it would have been a 0.5% increase in the cost of the house to run that to the
It's
purchasers.
already running right now for that. It's the price for the central well, or whether I run the 1.8 down for the water and sewer. It's a large cost, and we're already reducing the amount of homes that we could put in. In other words,
understand
we
that.
can do much more. I'm trying to save the trees.
Right,
You
no,
know,
I understand
it's
that.
just a little bit different.
And
in
I
this
appreciate that,
viewpoint.
I understand that, thank you.
Yeah. And I do have the engineer here to kind of give you an idea, and even for the neighbors, an idea of what type of trench this is and what we're really talking about. It's just a 5-inch line.
Any other questions for the applicant? Think we're good?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have 2 speaker cards this evening. I know some of you all were here at the last meeting, and if you spoke at the last meeting, we typically don't open it up again for you to speak again, but if you have something new to offer, we'll allow you to do that. If you spoke at the last meeting, your comments were captured, and they're part of the minutes, and they're part of the record for this that will go to the Board of Supervisors. So I just want you to be assured that everything you shared last meeting is still captured. So the first speaker card I have tonight is James Braxton and Janice Jackson. And if you would, when you come up to the podium, please state your name and your address.
Janice Jackson at 140 Bush Springs Road.
And I'm actually James Braxton Jr. I'm at 257 Bush Springs Road.
Please, go ahead. Sorry.
All right. I appreciate you listening to us this evening. First thing, I would like to say that I know the developer stated that he tried to get in touch with us and wanted to talk to us about what he had planned and everything. The reason that we didn't have a chance to do that because he kind of did it at the last minute, and nobody had a chance to get together and to be able to get together to have this meeting. That's what's the main reason we couldn't get with him. And another thing that kind of bothered us too is we kind of heard this after after everything was already put in. So, I mean, it was kind of lost on us that this was even going to happen until we got notice through the mail, through the letter through the county. I guess where we were, I guess, like, I don't know if the board knows this, but in that area, that is a very old area. I'm actually a fifth generation staying down there right now. My great grandfather actually helped start that community back there, and right now I would say from Twenty Woods on down to the end, the majority of the people that stays on that property are either retired, disability, or like me myself, I'm 60. I'm getting ready to retire. So, with the cost of everything that's been coming up, it's going to be almost impossible if they actually bring the sewer and everything down for these people to for us to be able to hook up to it and to be able to take care of those costs. And the big thing too, and I know one of you said about the road. You've been down that road. That road is very, very, very narrow. Even the school buses, when the school bus comes down there, you have to actually stop on the side of the road that the school bus go by so you can get up the road. The county, VDOT, hasn't really did anything to help us with the road. I mean, they come down every once in a while to cut the grass on the side, but other than that, we've been taking care of that road for many years. Well, I just got a few questions that we kind of got together and wanted to read to you guys. With anyone on Bush Springs address, including those not directly on Bush Springs, be allowed to connect to water and sewer system. I know you kind of went through that a little bit. And I guess the other one, with the addition of the 49 homes and more traffic on Bush Springs Road, would the existing road be widened to accommodate extra traffic? If so, would it be done before or after completion of the new homes? If that was the point, if that was the what was going to happen, if it's going to be improvements, would people have to, I guess, lose some of their property? Because I guess you know that, like I said, the road being so narrow that, I mean, it's everything is going to be in some people's front door. And we want to know if, if that would be, people would lose their property. If they do lose their property, would they be incentivized, would anything be offered to them? We're asking about existing, connecting to the existing water system. And if it went wrong, if we could repair it ourselves, why can't we repair it ourselves? Or, because I mean, I guess we don't have some of the county people here with us, stating some of the laws and stuff that the county has on, on the books and stuff. So we don't know if something that we would have to do or who would even tell us we could or couldn't. Depending on, like, some people, like, I guess, are close and some people aren't. I know my father's been on that property for, I know he's 81 now, and we pay, I know the Chesapeake Bay Act, where you have to pump your system, your septic system every 5 years, and you got to give the county notice that you do it. And I think everybody's here has been doing that well, and nobody's here that I know of has any problem with their well and septic. And I know you said something about them being older. Yes, they are, but they have been maintained. All the water, wells we've had, nobody's had to drill a new well that I know of within the last 20 years. So all of that is good with us. But I guess our main concern is about the cost of everything and just the traffic of being on that road, and who would take care of that.
And a couple other things I just want to read. Who determines if our well septic system fails to function, whether it should be or can be replaced or repaired? Who would determine that? Are there any other lines besides water that need to be installed on Bush Springs Road? Will Bush Springs Road be the main entrance or a second entrance to the new subdivision? Are there future plans for JCC to have to JCC to have, they have, they already approved, are there future plans for JCC to approve for the developers to go ahead and build a phase 2, 3 with additional homes? Will any land on or connected to Bush Springs Road be rezoned for apartments or townhouses? And are there any conflicts of interest with anyone on this committee that has any investments in this project? Those were some of the questions that we came up with that we needed answers to. And some of it you've already hit on tonight.
So, thanks for your comments, and just sort of to explain the process, you know, this is your all's opportunity to make comments to the Planning Commission, and I know my colleagues are really good about trying to incorporate or address some of these questions and concerns in discussion and questions, so it's just not an opportunity for us to get into an exchange at this time, so, you know, but we appreciate your comments, because they, you know, they'll be taken as part of the consideration and forwarded to the Board of Supervisors as well. So, thank you. I have 3 speakers on 1 card, so if you are speaking as one group, you're welcome to come up, or as individuals. I have Lori Walker, Vivian Morgan, and Carol Medford.
Good afternoon. I'm Lori Walker, 261 Bush Springs Road. I have a letter from Robert and Carol Medford, and also for Vivian Morgan. Robert and Carol is 189 Bush Springs Road. And she said that Robert and Carol Medford vetoed regarding the water and septic coming down Bush Springs Road.
Ms. Walker, do you mind pulling your mask
sure.
down? Because it's
I'm
a little
sorry.
muffled. It's okay. Thank you.
Robert and Carol Medford at 187 Bush Springs Road, they said that, 189 Bush Springs Road, they said that they request that the road be vetoed because it would mess up their septic tank and water, which is close by the road. And also, she said that they'd rather for the sewer and hookup to be at the end of Bush Springs Road. That way, it would not be connected at all, going straight down Bush Springs Road. And Miss Vivian wrote, she's at 156 Bush Springs Road. She said, we, the majority of Bush Springs Road Committee, do not approve of this committee being built at the end of Bush Springs Road. But if you must, we do and request that this project be rerouted and started through Oakland Farms or Hunters Creek. James City County has a large tract of 101 acres of land and 101 acres of land at 130 Crescent Drive in Oakland Farms. That seems to be the best way to install this water line and sewage. Going through another area would cause less impact for the landowners. As discussed and presented in the meeting on February the 2nd, Morrison developers nor the James City County Planning Commission do not have in place any plans to update, widen, replace, or rebuild Bush Springs Road. For a project of this size and development of Morrison Estates to build 49 houses going forward, and not to even think of widening or updating this substantial road is necessary or critical. Also, if this project should go forward, the widening rebuild of this land, this road should be a priority. The road should be widened or rebuilt first. I can't imagine if the current road handling this traffic due to tractor trailers, supplies, building equipment, material, trying to get in and out just to try to get to work. If anything happens, it's gonna be very hard for people to even get out the road. For example, if you're trying to get out the road and a tractor trailer coming in with supplies, you won't be able to move over because you'll run off the road. And then it said, with the given 49 homes to build an estimate household, will probably be at least 2 vehicles extra down Bush Springs Road. It will increase by 92 extra vehicles going to and from in the morning and the afternoon. This is not taking into consideration the current volume on Bush Springs Road. And then she also said that it is, hold on a second, Morston, if they would build this homes, the current house could get a real estate tax increase of 95%. And then when VDOT begins to install the water and sewer system, widen or fix the road, we also need to know the rate of just compensation, which that was already spoken of. And then last, we, the majority of the Bush Springs residents, do oppose installing the water, public water and sewer down Bush Springs Road, but we do ask if it would go down either Hunters Creek or Oakland Farms. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Yes, sir.
You guys can hear me. Thank you. My name is Jonathan Lemons. I live at 164 Bush Springs Road. The house was built last year in March. My septic tank is brand new, well as well, so I don't have any problems there. I'm opposed to it as well. For a living, I'm a general contractor. Got many degrees, groundwater engineer, all sorts of stuff. He says he's concerned about the trees, but we're not taking into consideration all the trees that are going to be cut down on the side of that road to widen the road, which you can hear from the other landlords here. It's a narrow road. Trees are already coming up underneath it, tearing it up. It's not going to be able to handle big-sized trucks, commercial vehicles. That's pretty much it. I think everybody on the street on Bush Springs Road is happy and content. We're all doing just fine. I think a lot of us right now with inflation as well can't really afford added costs, water bill, sewage bill, the inconvenience. Nobody's going to pay us, like they said, for the inconvenience of having to put our cars in the ditch trying to go to work in the morning or coming home in the afternoon because there's trucks coming up and down the street. So yeah, I like you to take that into consideration. If they're worried about the trees, they're going to tear a whole lot of them down just to get back there. So I'd like them to stay just right where they're at. And that's all I've got, gentlemen, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lemons. Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, sir.
My name is Jimmy Smith. I live at 206 Bush Springs Road. I've been there, well, going on 40 years now, and road conditions haven't changed since then. The road is narrow. If a bus, like it was stated before, if a bus comes down the road, somebody got to pull over to the side, and I'm almost in the ditch. My neighbor, if to put the sewage line or water line, be sitting in her front porch. And you know, the thing is that Bush Spring Road is a family knit community. A lot of children plays on Bush Springs Road. To open the road up and the volume of traffic could be catastrophic. I mean, it just, the only thing I can say is thank God that there's no accidents that have happened as of yet. But when you add the 49 homes at the end to that, that traffic quadruples. And the thing is that we, as far as safety point, that's to bring that much traffic down Bush Spring Road, that the safety aspect of it goes even higher. You know, my kids grew up there. A lot of the people, the members of Bush Spring Road, their kids grew up there. And the way it is now is that there has not been an accident. But if you bring that much traffic down Bush Spring Road after the 49 homes are built, there's no telling. Because you don't know what type of people that's going to be buying homes or even know what all they see is a road where they can speed, get to their homes. Because I'm a truck driver by trade, 22 years military, retired, and what I do now is I still drive, but I'm still careful of my surroundings. We don't know who's going to come in. We don't know how they're going to respond to that condition, because a lot of folks, they will say, "Oh, we got a wide road now. Let's gas on it." That's unacceptable. So as far as widening Bush Spring Road, I'm against. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Yes, sir.
I can speak for my daughter. My name is Charles Brandon. She at 220 Bush Springs Road.
I'm sorry, could I get your last name again?
Brantley, Brantley.
Thank you, sir.
I've been following everything, but I'm trying to get to where the money part of it. Now, for putting in a pump for a hookup, it's gonna cost you $16,000, right? But I can go put a well in for about $6,000, $8,000. That's a big difference. But then if it break down,
Mr. Brantley,
it's up to the owner to pay for it.
Point your directions, your comments this way, please.
I'm sorry.
That's all right, thanks.
I'm sorry. But you know, people don't have that type of money. The road is one thing, but earning a living and trying to pay for your water every month, your sewer every month, but then you come up, you got your septic tank and your well, you're paying that by what? Can't afford it. I just want to say that part.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Deanna Kubik. I live at 168 Bush Springs Road. I bought my house in 2020 as well with a new septic and well system. I just wanted to put forth a clarifying question. The gentleman mentioned that should the septic field or the well be damaged with the modifications, such as my septic field runs right up to the front of my property to the road. If that septic field is damaged beyond repair that they would cover, where would the funds for either replacing the system or connecting to the city water come from? Would we have to pay for that, or would that be covered under the repairs that they would offer? Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Clovis Braxton, 230 Bush Spring Road. I've been hearing all my neighbors talk about Bush Spring, the traffic, this and that. Well, I've been there for 50 years, and I'm the oldest one, I guess, that own there. My grandfather used to have a horse and buggy. It was no road. It was a dirt road. And then it come to be a pretty good road. I mean, and they talk about the traffic, this and that. Well, I don't know how it be. I guess if 49 houses come, they have to widen Bush Spring Road or make it highway better, whatsoever. So I'm saying that they just don't know how it was back 50 years ago with that road and the people, everything. And but then this thing about the sewer line, I got a question about that. They talk about it, but they never actually say how much it will cost if you hook up to it. You know, and like I've seen up there like 5,000 something like that. But can they tell you how much it will cost to hook up to it or whatever? You answered that question or whatever?
We can't answer that question at this moment, but I think that we covered a fair amount of it earlier, so we can, I'm sure somebody will reiterate it in discussion here.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Braxton. Last call. So, seeing and hearing no additional takers, I will close the public hearing and open it up for discussion. Mr. Crop?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start out. I have a number of concerns with this application. Were it a case where the property was extending outside of the PSA by a small amount, I might be more receptive to it, but 81 of 110 acres are outside of the PSA, which is approximately 68% of the developable area. This is not a small incursion outside the PSA. And these properties, or a number of these properties, have been the subject of land use change applications going back as early as 1997, as mentioned in the staff report, for 4 different comprehensive plans. Each one of the applications have been denied by the Board of Supervisors, and no change to the PSA line has been made. One of the concerns that I have is the precedent that's set. If an applicant can come forward and say, oh, well, this is an energy-friendly development I'm putting in, and therefore, even though the comprehensive plan does target growth inside the PSA, this is a better deal. What's to stop any number of applicants outside of the PSA saying, well, I know that I technically shouldn't be able to extend water and sewer, but my development is good also. I think that's a slippery slope, and I think once you open the gates, especially for a comprehensive plan that was only approved this past October, I think you're potentially allowing for even more applications of this nature to come forward. We've been hearing a lot over the last couple of years, oftentimes an argument being made in favor of a particular application, the land use application, is that, yeah, well, if you don't approve what I'm asking for, I'll develop it by right. Well, at some point, we have to say, well, we have a comprehensive plan, we have a PSA line that we've drawn, and if you feel that you have to develop it by right, go ahead and do that. I'm just very concerned about the direction some of this is going. I also, one of the reasons I asked the question I did of staff is I'm also concerned that if this SUP is approved, it conveys with that whole length of the properties being requested for sewer and water. And so, say this applicant decides for whatever reason that they can't go through with this project and they put it up for sale. So all of a sudden, you've got a property up for sale that already has an extension to the PSA into 81 acres. Then that, again, could be a rationale for a new owner to say, well, you know what, we've already got utilities, we're going in for a higher density and we want to develop this property even further. So I think on all levels, there's a lot of pitfalls associated with this. I do share the concerns of some of the speakers when they talked about the narrowness of the road. I drove it again just this morning, and I can't imagine how tractor trailers are going to come up with building supplies and residents be able to come and go. That's also why I asked about a traffic impact analysis. I just feel that for all the reasons I just outlined, that this SUP request should be denied, and I cannot support that.
Mr. Polster?
I'm going to probably repeat some of what Mr. Kropf had to say, but some of it I think it's for Mr. Rogers' benefit, since he wasn't here at the last time. And that is that we struggled with this for a year and a half in our comp plan, and specifically, we looked at this land use application to bring it inside of the PSA for it. And we early on said no and put it aside for it. And this is actually, the fourth time that this has come to the board over the number of years for it. And that issue of the PSA was not an easy one, because we were asked by the board to relook at whether or not we should contract or expand the PSA. And a lot of that concern had to do with the rural lands and the preservation of it. So I felt really comfortable when we made that decision back in the March timeframe not to bring this into the PSA for it. I think the thing that bothers me the most about where we are today was that I felt very strongly that there needed to be an interchange with the community. And I understand that you made the offer. I also understand that at the last minute, for some folks, they weren't able to come. And if you take a look at the community that's here, it is a tight community, and I'm sure they all wanted to be there at the same time and not come in ones and twos. But what's instructive to me is the same questions that they were concerned about at our last meeting 30 days ago are the same thing. So when I asked staff whether or not any of the information had been shared that the staff had developed and the applicant had developed, I was told that they would, talk about it now. But the questions we got that were in that information had to do with the road. And the response from the applicant was, no. That's a VDOT problem, not mine. So that road is never going to be repaired or widened unless the VDOT guys do that. Good luck with that. Anyhow, I'm sorry, I don't mean to get into that twirl. But that road is so darn narrow. And the reason that I brought this up at the last meeting was when we were talking about the Stonehouse property and the Croker Road, and people were concerned about the development. And we heard the same sort of thing about septic fields in the front, hearing about how you didn't go to work at school because you were going to get stuck behind a bus, or that your mailboxes were going to get knocked down because of the narrowness of the road. And this road is narrower than Croker on that. Now, so the questions and the concerns that the community raised, from my perspective, were never addressed, and we still have them to now. The other point, and the concern that I had on the Croker Road that I applied to the Bush Springs here, was I was trying to figure out myself whose properties would be impacted if this project went through in terms of the water and the sewer line, given the 15 feet on either side of the road, which is a right-of-way. And so I looked at 7 properties, was fortunate enough that the Virginia Department of Health local office here in Williamsburg provided us the information in the short span. But I only asked for a certain amount, not all of it. And so I've heard this evening from at least 2 other folks that they're concerned about that issue that we're part of the 7. Now, the other thing that I think is instructive about the comment from the last gentleman that was up here at 220 Bush Springs is when you go back and take a look at the record that the VDH guys provided us, you're going to see a track record that goes from 78, 77, 92, 18. of whether it's water or it's a rearrangement of septic field or a replacement of a box. And I go back to the point that I was making before, is given the cost of if they have to hook up, given the age of their systems, it's cheaper for them to do the repairs and not to have to hook up if they don't have to. And so I think you've asked a bunch of questions in terms of trying to get at the cost of what this is to those applicants versus what it would be without. And so I'm bothered about that. And I think we heard this evening about members of this community that are on a fixed income. And being one of those people, I understand what that means. Okay? And I remember a lady coming here the last time that put $9,000 into a new system. I mean, that was a heck of an investment that she had to put out of her pocket for that. So I'm still very concerned that we don't know what the impact is on those septic and sewer and wells and those impacts. I mean, we just don't know. I mean, I appreciate the fact that we were able to at least get some idea, but all it did in my mind is raise more questions about how many other people were impacted about that. And so I'm not supportive. And it's the impact onto the community that's not being considered. That's what really bothers me about this. And I understand that they made on a show, but you could have asked for more time. And we could have made a real positive effort to reach out to the community. And I know that we've done that in several other ones. As a matter of fact, the Hazel one was delayed, 3 months? So they had 3 different community meetings over the holidays so that they would accommodate people's schedules. So I would have expected something of that nature, at least, to make sure that the folks that turned out the last time and have showed up tonight would have at least been satisfied that their concerns were being addressed. No matter what the answer is. May not like the answer about the road, okay? But at least you would have known that that road wasn't going to get fixed unless the VDOT guys do it, okay? And so I would have hoped for that, at least some of the information that was provided to us and provided by the applicant would have at least been there. So that's where I stand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Snell?
Okay, I want to thank everybody on Bush Springs Road who showed up tonight. I wouldn't drive that road at night if my life depended on it. I went down there. I could not believe how narrow it was. And when I came to the end, I had to back up and turn around. It just scares me, just even thinking about putting water and sewer down that road and digging up both sides of the road for however long it takes them to put that in. And then when I added up all these lovely numbers, I came up to 28,856. That would be an average for people to hook up to it. Another thing, it does not meet the comprehensive plan to go outside of the PSA, and we've shown that in the past. The road's too narrow. People are going to have trouble accessing their road or even getting out of their driveways during construction, even construction with the houses, but with the water and sewer too. So your road will be torn up for 2 years maybe. And I see a community of people that love where they live and are concerned about where they live, and they all know each other. And we don't have a lot of that anymore, and I think that's really important to have. And they all look out for each other. I think they take care of each other. And I just don't think we should inconvenience them with doing something like that could potentially cost them a lot of money in the long run. So I will not support this.
Dr. Rose?
I'm not going to add too much because of what everyone else has said. What has been impressed upon me tonight is I think we're faced again with this question of, is it right for this piece of land without thinking about the broader issues? And it's a frustrating part of, I think, sitting up here that we often can't. And when I think about this development, 49 homes, if the line doesn't get extended, probably double that. I know it's going to get built. You have the right to do that. But it seems like a really poorly thought out plan to build 98 houses at the end of this road. We've heard from the community about the size of the road, and it doesn't sound like there's any plan to change that. And I know that we're not considering the road here as part of the discussion, but I'm just I can't imagine the impact this 49 or 98 homes is going to have on this community, aside from the cost of having to connect to this line when their septic system fails. And we heard that there's options, but at that point, there's no options. And for people on a fixed income to have to put in $30,000 to connect based on the estimates that we received, it's just that impact, along with what this development is going to mean, is just enormously significant. And I can't support this. I wouldn't support this development, even though I'm a huge supporter of what you're trying to do in terms of building low carbon footprint homes. I applaud that. I'm probably one of the greener people sitting up here, but I can't imagine burdening this community and putting them out in the way this proposal would.
Dr. Rhodes? Mr. Rogers?
So full disclosure, I watched you all on TV, so thank you for repeating it for me, but that was actually the second time. Because I don't want to repeat Mr. Kraft, who I thought was channeling me 5 seats over, I think that the idea of a PSA, I think it's a good thing, meaning there's a primary service area for a reason, and that is to encourage focus and growth back within your initial, city or county limits where your infrastructure exists, and perhaps not everything is up to scratch. And in addition, by forcing you to focus back in, you then preserve that rural and that agricultural quality that every time they do a county survey here, it comes back, as there's an overwhelming support to try to keep James City County greener. And I understand the tree argument, which I think is compelling, just as I think your all's history about living on the road is very compelling. But I really can't get past the basic legal concept that we have a primary service area that I believe if you go ahead and you grant an extension as large as this one is, as was mentioned, we're not extending a variance, 25 to 30 feet to create some public benefit that we would all recognize. It's a neighborhood that sounds wonderful. It sounds, I think I heard 500,000 plus per homes. I mean, I'm all for people being able to live in wonderful things that they can afford, but I don't see that as an argument that overcomes the one that says the PSA should be protected in order to enforce this comprehensive plan that the county has adopted. So at least from my standpoint, I can't see supporting it.
I do just want to make one more point, so we're all clear on this, at least I am. By developing this, by putting in 100 to 200% of the homes at the end of this compared to what exists along Bush Springs Road, you're turning this from a neighborhood into a pass-through. And I hope you consider that when you build this development, but that is what's going to happen. I happen to live off a road that is a pass-through, and it causes a lot of problems. And that's exactly what's going to happen here.
I'm not going to repeat anything that anybody said so far, although I agree with all of it. But building houses on this parcel of land is clearly not clear to me anyway, not in the best interests of the people of James City County, the people on this road specifically, but broader, the entire residents of James City County. It will further corrupt the design standards of Toano. We're trying to protect the village character. It'll add to the traffic burdens, the growing traffic burdens on Richmond Road. But more than that, we have a situation where a parcel of land outside the PSA where residential development is specifically discouraged by the county is zoned R1, which is a zoning district that encourages residential development and is designed to accommodate residential development. And how can that be? We have a number of those situations that have come up in the 5 years that I've been on this commission. We have a dysfunctional comprehensive plan and an archaic zoning ordinance. And we're going to continue to have these contradictory cases. At the last Board of Supervisors meeting and the Planning Commission meeting that preceded that on the Hazelwood case, we had the same situation. Mr. Kropp alluded to this, where the applicant heralded the use of a master plan, and if we didn't have a master plan, then it would fall back to by right use, which, and that was, the implication was that was clearly a substandard solution to the development of that county. Well, if the by right use, in that case it was a B1 zoning district, if the by right use is so terrible, why don't we fix the zoning ordinance to make it not so terrible? Same here, same case here. So I agree with all the particulars that were mentioned here tonight, but I also have broader concerns, and those, thank you for letting me unburden myself with them.
Thanks, Mr. Haldeman. Actually, for me, it's a tough case because I actually live in Toanna Woods, so I consider myself a neighbor of you all. What we don't talk about is, if you're pulling out of Toanna Woods, it's hard to see down Bush Springs Road. So one of you all drives a big silver pickup truck, and I pulled out the other day, and you were flashing your lights at me because you thought I was going to cut you off. So I'm just letting you know that was me. I mean, for me, I've taken my kids, and I apologize if I've cut across your backyards, but, a bunch of us in the neighborhoods used to walk down Bush Springs Road through the farm and then back up through the woods to get back into Toanna Woods. So we've done that a lot, and I completely agree. The road is a challenge, right? It's a narrow road, right of way. There's no requirement for the applicant whether they build 49 homes or 90 homes to make improvements. And really, for me, where I'm struggling with this is, what's the lesser of two evils, right? And I mean, that's the challenge. And at 49 homes, that's relatively half the traffic that we would see at 90. So, I appreciate everybody coming out. I appreciate JCSA coming out tonight to be a part of this discussion. But I really struggle with this, and for the folks that live down Bush Springs Road and the folks in Toanna Woods, just to answer a couple of the questions that came up before and again today, there's no water and sewer in Oakland. There's no public right of way in Hunters Creek to be able to bring the water and sewer through that way. So there's just no good solution. I support this only because it's a lesser number of homes, and I would much prefer to see, and I don't know, Mr. Kinsman, if it's a possibility. I do share Mr. Kropp's concern that if water and sewer went in, that it could potentially change hands, and then we might have somebody wanting to put in a larger community. I don't know. Could it be a condition of the SUP to limit to 49 homes, or? Thank you. I know there was a question earlier about, whether or not the extension could, when we did Jolly Pond Road, the two schools, we extended that and said, no, we couldn't have any additions to that line. And I think that's where Mr. Epstein was going earlier tonight. We have extended water and sewer and said there could be no additional connections. And then when Deer Park came along, we ended up looping into it and adding to it anyway. So I think that's where Mr. Epstein was coming in. So, I appreciate all the comments tonight, and it is a tough one. And, but for me, it's a vote of a lesser of two evils, because we would be less of an impact on the environment in producing this and putting this down to 49 homes. So.
I wanted to disclose the fact that I talked with Mr. Getty today. You didn't ask for disclosures at the
Thanks.
meeting.
Yeah, I have a note I forgot to ask earlier.
I spoke with him also. Yeah.
So, any other disclosures?
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion, if that's all right.
Yes, Mr. Crop?
I would like to make a motion to deny SUP 21-0023 Bush Springs Road Water and Sewer Extension.
So there is a motion to deny. So an aye means you support denial, and a nay means that you are in favor. So is that right, Mr. Holt?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Crop,
Aye.
Mr. Haldeman,
Aye.
Mr. Polster,
Aye.
Mr. Rose, Ms. Knoll,
Aye.
Mr. Rogers,
Aye.
and Mr. O'Connor.
No.
Thank you, motion carries.
Thank you very much. So thank you all for coming out tonight. Appreciate it.
I thought I was going to be more depth. Because I don't really know the history, but it would bother me.
Interesting discussion.
They were asking for slight.
So
Westport, I know I have a little bit of an allergy thing going on. They were asking for a really slight
okay, great.
increase in the PSA because, as I
Hey,
understand
folks.
it, they're,
Do you mind? We still have more work to do. So do you mind carrying the conversation out? Thank you. So next on our agenda tonight is Planning Commission considerations, and we have the Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals 2021 Annual Report. Mr. Holt?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So I feel like I say every 2 weeks, it's been a whole year. Gosh, it's been a whole year again. It goes by faster and faster, as you all can appreciate. So yes, included in your agenda packets tonight in a format that hopefully you will recognize from the last many years we've done this. We've included our annual report that covers the work of both the Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals for 2021, and I will certainly open up for any questions. Just can't tell you how much I appreciate Mr. Haldeman being back on, because having him help me write this chair's letter on the front, it's a lot easier when you're actually back on the commission than trying to track you down in second retirement, so thank you for that. But if it's otherwise acceptable, if it would be okay to get a motion to accept that report, I'd appreciate it. And then when the BZA does a corresponding approval, we'll always share a copy with the Board of Supervisors as well.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals 2021 Annual Report.
Thank you, Mr. Haldeman. And we can just do this by acclamation, right?
Correct.
So just be a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
abstain.
Thank you very much.
Oh, except for that BZA portion. That's
Yeah, you are at least going to move your picture over next year anyway.
Planning Commission discussions and requests. Holster?
Didn't we have something from the director?
Yeah, I mean, I was going in some.
Oh,
just two
sorry,
quick
I
items.
just
That's
went
okay.
too fast. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
I know you wanted to go home, so.
It's all good. I know we all do. Two items, if I could bring to your attention under Planning Director's report, as we usually do, again annually. I have in your packets a draft calendar for the remainder of this calendar year and a proposed sort of placeholder calendar for next year. Follows the same format that we've always done. Regular meetings are still the first Wednesday of every month, starting at 6 p.m. As you'll recall, generally there are only two exceptions to that rule for the full Planning Commission. That'll be that third week of March, so we're going to have a special one-off meeting coming up in 2 weeks. That'll be your public hearing for the Capital Improvements Program and also your annual organizational meeting to consider selecting a new chair and vice chair for the remainder of the year. Reestablishing membership on policy and DRC. So, again, the format's the same. Again, as with the years past, we'll go in, we'll sometimes tweak those dates depending on what holidays fall where. Please take a look. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know, but bring that calendar back to you again at your organizational meeting for adoption. So that's in there. And also wanted to share with you, as many of you know, James City County is developing a natural and cultural assets plan that was going to help identify, evaluate, and prioritize the county's highest value natural resources and cultural assets, and to identify opportunities to protect and restore them. As part of that project, we're asking the community to help review our draft maps of the county's natural and cultural assets. These are going to include habitat cores, agriculture, forestry, water, recreation, publicly available recreation, and our heritage and culture resources. And to identify any important resources that we might have missed so far that aren't on the maps. Those are going to be really important to capture. So we're really encouraging and inviting everybody to either log on. You can take the survey online at jamescitycountyva.gov/NCA survey, or we certainly have paper copies at the library all week and at the Recreation Center. Survey window is going to close next Monday, March the 7th, but if you can, please take an opportunity to log in. We'd really appreciate and value your input. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have. Any other questions or comments I can help address on the Planning Director's report?
I wanted to take advantage of having the county attorney here. And I noticed that from your spreadsheet of upcoming conceptual reviews for the DRC, I think I noticed either 2 or 3 tourist homes / Airbnbs on there. And to take advantage of his presence here, the notion of having a condition on the SUP limiting that to the property itself. Is that still in the cards?
Well, so they're always going to be tied to the property itself. So if I could rephrase that, are you maybe kind of getting back at that sunset clause
Exactly.
piece, or to a current owner rather than?
Yes.
Okay.
No, sir, Mr. Polster. It's my opinion that SUPs run with the property and that you cannot tie it to a particular owner except in very, very limited circumstances where you have a truly temporary use, like a borrow pit. But otherwise, the SUP runs with the property.
I don't mean to sound facetious, but I understood from Mr. Halavin that it was 50-50, and all of a sudden we're now 100%.
Well, we're 100%. I think throughout Virginia, maybe it's 50-50.
That's correct. There is definitely a split among local government attorneys as to whether or not you can do a sunset clause. So I'm sure when you guys go do your training, Mr. Rogers, when you do the training, you'll hear of localities that allow sunset clauses. I'm not in that camp. There have been a couple of bills brought before the General Assembly that would specifically allow sunset clauses, including we've tried one as well, that have failed. And I take that to mean that the General Assembly does not believe that we can do a sunset clause. In full disclosure, the other side of the attorneys believe that because the Virginia Code allows a BZA, if it were one to issue special use permits to include a sunset clause, surely a Board of Supervisors can as well. My counter to that is, well, a BZA is a quasi-judicial body and the board is not. So there is a split, and I'm firmly in the you can't do it camp. Sorry.
Well, I apologize for taking advantage of your presence here, but
That's
I couldn't
okay, sir.
resist.
I'll be playing this venue for the next few months. So.
You can ask again next month. Maybe I'll get a different answer.
didn't know you were such a strict constitutionalist.
It happens, sir.
Next DRC, is there a DRC between now and the 14th? Or DRC meeting?
I'm not
Haven't heard.
entirely sure. If there is one scheduled, I don't know if we have anything on the agenda
And there's
just
things
yet.
scheduled, but then Beth always says it's canceled.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
Okay.
So is that the same day as our meeting? Yeah. Is that the 14th? Yeah.
I was just curious whether or not we needed to appoint Mr. Rogers to a committee, but if we're not going to meet between now and the 14th, it doesn't
No,
make sense.
I don't think we need to.
I'm the one that cancels all the time.
Once the DRC.
I'm available.
Anything else for Mr. Holt? Sorry to jump so far ahead. Planning Commission discussions and requests, or was that it, Mr. Polster? Dr. Rose?
I do have a question. I have to go back to this discussion, and I apologize to belabor the point. Besides it being, to me, a terrible idea to build this development here, it's going to happen. The question that I have is I don't understand why this wasn't solved by the developer, and maybe they couldn't do this to say we're going to put 40 times 30,000 in a trust, and anytime somebody needs to connect, the money comes out of that. Wasn't that a simple, straightforward solution? It would have raised the price of the house, by my estimates, about 1.4% on houses that are running up to $700,000.
You vote on the application that's before you.
I understand that, but what am I missing here? Why wasn't that a simple solution?
Mr. Kidsman, I'm glad you're here tonight.
That's a development cost. It goes into the price of the house, right?
Well, that's what I was wondering. Is there a legal issue with that? It just...
No, I would not have recommended that the Planning Commission and the board include that as a condition, but that's certainly something that the developer could have done on his own.
Right. Just trying to understand, because it seemed like there was a clear path to fix this, and I don't know, it makes me a little skeptical.
Wouldn't have fixed it.
But I understand, but it's going to be developed no matter what. I guess your point is the line going outside of the PSA was the issue.
I think he's really doing building something out there that it's not a build and they will come thing, because your access is down Bush Springs Road, and I'm not buying a $700,000 house, having to go down that road every day.
If they were available today, they'd be bought up in an instant.
Today they would be, but down the road, I don't think that that's going to be the big issue. And if he puts 94 in there or whatever, then he's down from 1 acre and 2 acre lots to 1 acre or half acre lots, so the lots will all be smaller. I just don't think it's I used to build houses, I used to develop things. I wouldn't touch a piece of land that was landlocked like that.
Thank you very much. I have Board of Supervisors for the month, so I will try to figure out a reason to go out of town so I can rely on Mr. Polster. So
Glad to do it, because somebody owes me.
I'm down one. If you get stuck, give me a call.
thanks. I will actually be looking tomorrow just to see where I'm going to be next week. So
Anyone's got to be better than my last stint, if Paul remembers correctly.
and on that point, I'll take a motion to adjourn to March 14th at 6 p.m., which will be the organizational meeting. Mr. Polster, I will ask if you don't mind. I know the minutes will go out, but if you could just forward your reports to everybody on the Planning Commission.
I have.
Okay, sorry, I didn't catch you.
No, I did that.
I didn't look at the two, so.
I'd send it to everybody,
Okay, great, so,
to
that-
include Mr. Rogers.
Where are we meeting on the 14th?
right here.
Right here, okay.
6.
So I'll take a motion to adjourn to March 14th at 6 p.m. Do we have a motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned.